Welcome back to another episode of the Apocalypse Podcast. I am one co-host, Kyle. With me, my brother, co-host number 2,
Taylor. That's me.
Taylor. And today we are going to talk about my all-time favorite video game, Diablo 2. Not Diablo 1, sorry for anyone out there who really loves Diablo 1, but Diablo 2 is my favorite.
Not gonna apologize for Diablo 3 or 4 heads out there.
Well,
though,
those games just basically don't exist in the face of Diablo 2 to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so yeah, I was too young to play Diablo 1, and I just started getting into video games when Diablo 2 came out, and it just left an impression on me that is not replaceable. So Diablo 2 is my all-time favorite game in my all-time favorite genre as well. The ARPG genre is my absolute favorite. And Diablo 2 just does literally everything perfectly. At least that's how I feel. It'll maybe be interesting to hear, even though I know you think extremely fondly on the game too, but...
So what? I don't know if you remember kind of playing it back. Do you remember how you felt about it before synergies were a thing? Because, like, I know with, like, one of the updates or the expansion, I can't remember which it was, where they added where, like, skills...
It was
putting points in other skills.
It was an update after the Lord of Destruction expansion. Hopefully I'm not blaspheming, but I'm pretty sure the Lord of Destruction update came out, and then they introduced synergies. I believe I might even know the patch. Patch 1.13, I think, was the synergies patch. And let me double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's it. Anyways, continue.
But, like, I just remember being so obsessed reading that Diablo 2 strategy guidebook in the skills section and reading all the different classes' abilities, because it just felt like, at the time, like, this game was the most complicated and intricate thing in the world. And, like, I don't know, the Necromancer Revive spell to me still breaks my brain. I don't think I've ever seen a game do a move quite like that. And it still, I don't know, even though I'm pretty sure Necromancer sucked. The skeletal, minions all sucked in Diablo 2 builds, but man, I just remember having that army of dudes with me as a Necromancer was one of the most profoundly fun ARPG things ever. Was running down in is it River of Flames?
Yeah, River of Flame.
I don't know if I like that. That should be called the Heckin' River or something.
That'd
be much better.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't consider that specific name is... I was wrong. It's patch 1.10 for the synergies. Patch 1.13, I think, was the last patch.
The final.
Before they remastered the game 10 years later. Yeah, weirdly, I don't think I ever played a summoner... okay, so I have thousands of hours on Diablo 2. Thousands and thousands and thousands of hours over many, many decades. And by many,
Dude,
many,
you haven't even been alive
2.
for thousands of hours.
Yeah, we've only been playing Diablo for 2 decades. But, yeah, I played Diablo 2 vanilla, but not for that long. I think we got into it very shortly before Lord of Destruction came out, because I remember Lord of Destruction coming out and being hyped for the new classes and the new act and the rune words, and it was amazing, but I didn't play much of vanilla Diablo 2. And in my whole time playing Diablo 2, what I was trying to get at here is that there were still archetypes I never touched, ever, and a summoning necro was one of them. I never played a summoner.
I never ended up playing a Boazon or a Javelin.
Oh man, yeah, those are the best.
I know you
see,
like,
yeah, that's one of my.
There's so much in.
All right, sorry. Go ahead.
One of the fun things, actually, because I told you recently that I've been playing Resurrected, just as kind of like, it's been a while since I played Diablo 2. How does it hold up? What's it look like? What are my memories say about it? And I had the hardest thing was picking the class, because I wanted to play all of them at the same time. They all are super interesting to me. Though I think the one down replaying it, there is a flaw, and that is, like, melee builds early are really boring.
Oh,
Like, it just takes
yeah.
a little bit to get going sometimes, but the little bit is only like a couple hours instead of like 20 or 30. Like, big problem with Path of Exile, a lot of the time is the level of complexity, or how long it takes before your build starts to feel like a build instead of like, I'm just using the best move to get me to like.
Careful, I don't think you know what you're talking about here.
I don't. Yeah, I don't. I'm telling you, as a new player,
Yeah.
like as someone who's just playing it, because obviously, if you put in can look at your Steam record of Path of
I have
Exile.
thousands of hours.
Can you remember what that game looked like the first time you were on that beach? No. So shut your butt.
I definitely can. I remember playing the beta way back when.
But Diablo 2's like early on, like I actually respect Akara before end of Act 1 because I was going werewolf, and I was like, this is just not that. I'm going to get burnt out.
Yeah.
Just so then I instantly went. As you know, I was a druid. I went the fire side of the spell druid because last time I was a hurricane. And tornado was the two. I was the one time I did a spellcaster druid, so I was like,
yeah,
let me try the other way. And it is so, man, the spell Armageddon doesn't function the way I remember. It's way better. It's just like Hurricane, but like, you don't see the edge. I don't know.
I think in the Diablo 2 remaster, they improved Armageddon quite a bit because it was virtually worthless in the original Diablo 2.
Okay, that's what I remember.
So I think
I'm not crazy.
I think they just. I might be completely making it up, but in my head, like more of the meteors fall and the targeting is better or something, or the AoE at least is bigger, so they actually hit more things. But yeah, Armageddon is way bigger.
They feel like they added kind of the Fisher spell, like the cracks in the ground or something. Yeah, it feels like it used to be meteors would fall and they just would like always miss. But maybe now they act like actual impact, and they have an AoE, and they leave. I don't know. In any case, it's much better now. And
so I wanted to bring up something because you mentioned Path of Exile. Ironically, or maybe not ironically, melee in Path of Exile is also notoriously dogshit compared to everything else in Path of Exile. And so it's funny that Diablo 2 set the standard for like how slow and annoying and boring melee is, and then Path of Exile, which is supposed to be the spiritual successor that, you know, came out 10 years later and has further been updated for 10 more years, and it's still like the key to making melee good, quote unquote, in Path of Exile is to just make it as ranged as possible. Like the best melee builds are like, you know, cyclone builds where you get the AoE as big as your entire screen and can leap slam from pack to pack, and so you don't ever have to actually engage in the melee combat. Or like, you know, earthquake, or, you know, bleed earthquake is not really a thing anymore, but yeah, so it's funny that they've just still never fixed melee, and even in Path of Exile fucking 2, melee is still dog shit.
I was gonna ask you. It was like so 10 years later, and that sequel. No, okay.
Yeah, they can't fix it. I think melee is just something that I don't know if a game will ever be able to fix it in the ARPG genre, because the whole point of it is to blast screens and move like quick and get loot, and it's just melee is sort of the antithesis to what ARPGs usually boil down to. So, like, if you think about the best farming builds, right, in Diablo 2, it's unequivocally, for boss farming anyway, it's a Blizzard Sorceress, right? You just teleport at the speed of light, and then you Blizzard down the boss. But, like, Blizzard has really good AoE coverage. It's a bit slow, but it's got insane, like, focused damage. So if you find a unique pack you want to kill, you can just blitz it down in 2 seconds. And, like, you know, you think about Javazons in the cow level. You get Pierce so that your javelins, your Lightning Fury actually goes through enemies, but every enemy it hits, it splinters. And so it pierces and splinters on every enemy hit, and you throw one javelin into a pack of cows and they'll all just fucking explode. So, like, all of the best builds are not melee. And I'm trying to even think, because, like, obviously Zealadins are good. Fury Werewolf is pretty good. Werebear is very solid. So
what about Assassins?
My thoughts are a little.
Do they have anything?
Do what?
I think Assassins
no,
had a little bit.
Yeah, with the martial arts
were at least something. At least it's like a buff you had to like maintain. Like, even if it wasn't exciting, at least it was engaging. Where it's like, I have something I can do to make me stronger from pack to pack, instead of let me just empty a mana pool and then fill it back up, because that's usually what most melee builds are early.
Okay, so my thoughts are a bit scattered because, and I have a feeling this podcast is going to be like that because there's just so much to say about Diablo 2 and I love it so much and I could talk about it forever. What I wanted to actually say is, I do think, weirdly, Diablo 2 had the best melee of like any ARPG I've played. Now that I'm actually thinking about it, because, and it has to do with the pacing of Diablo 2, because even the fastest, strongest builds, right? Like, the game is still fairly slower paced. Like, for instance, teleport is the ubiquitous skill. You play sorceress to get teleport. That's what you do every ladder start. You play Sorc, you build into Blizzard, and then you farm Hell Mephisto until you get a Shaco, and then you can, like, you eventually respec into a lightning sorceress, and then you can just own the entire game, but it's an insanely expensive build. But if you're not playing sorceress, like, I think melee in Diablo 2 is okay. And I never played... Okay, holy shit, dude. My brain is going like 1 mile per minute. Crazy right now. The pacing of the game just inherently made melee more tolerable in Diablo 2, because it took a lot longer for your character to come online, and even when it did, you had to struggle with mana. You still had to kind of kite packs. Like, you still have to play the game. And barbarians, because they have so much health, paladins, because they have shields and tons of block, like, you can be pretty damn tanky, and it counteracts how bad melee is. Combat is obviously slower, but you can actually take hits. Like, if you try to get in melee range as a sorceress, you die. Your defense as a sorceress is literally teleport. And then later, when you have 2,000 mana, it's energy shield. But until then, like, teleport is your version of defense as a sorceress, whereas they balance the game super well that, you know, a werewolf, while meleeing, or a werebear, you're pretty tanky, and you can take the hits. And that's something that's kind of lost in modern ARPGs, where, like, that's why I could never get into Last Epic, because from the moment you start the game, you basically feel overpowered. Enemies are nothing, you insta-kill everything, and all you have to do is just, like, I don't know, you build defense, but your skills just naturally clear the screen and get way, way, way strong super fast. So there was no nuance in the game to me. It just felt really boring.
It did feel like a game that's like, what if every character's level 1 was level 30 Diablo 2 skills? And then, like, that's the baseline and build off of that. It does seem a little loud and can be kind of hard to parse out any nuance and, like, I don't know, do anything whenever. I don't know. I was a little bored by Last Epic, and I didn't think it was bad. It just didn't, I don't know, it just, like, couldn't keep my attention, and that might be why.
That's exactly right. It didn't click with me. But anyways, long tangent was that melee is boring in Diablo 2, but it felt like it worked with the way the pacing of the game is. Obviously, like, cow level, you know, a whirlwind barb in cow levels it works, but it's really slow and boring. A fury werewolf is pretty slow, but that's not what they're made for, and you can target other content, which I really liked. Whereas in Diablo, I guess maybe even Diablo 3, Last Epic, Path of Exile, there isn't really specific content you can target if you have a slower build. And that's something that's kind of lost with the whole endgame obsession that games have now, is like, the beginning of the game is just like bullshit, and you're building your character to get to the real game, which is at the end. And I guess it was actually
ironically, Kyle, that's what the problem with modern MMOs is, because of World of Warcraft designed their game around, like, well, after original World of Warcraft, it's like the game doesn't really start to you max out, but you still have to level. So it's like, well, this middle part, this
Yeah.
leveling part's not that engaging. So I think it's funny that another Blizzard game that kind of set that standard. Though I would say, yeah, Diablo 2 was before then. It was not. The
And
leveling process felt like the game. You never really got. I don't know. Continue. You have better thoughts.
Well, I was gonna say that Diablo 2 also feels special in that it was kind of a lightning in the bottle thing. It came out at the perfect time. It sort of invented a genre, but also because of the time it came out, it had limits. And I think if Diablo 2 were to be made as a new game today, a new ARPG, it would come out as something like Last Epic or whatever, where it would learn from its past mistakes. It would make the game like, well, people have the most fun when they're the most powerful, so let's make people a little bit stronger, a little earlier, and then people got bored just farming Bale and bosses, so let's add an actual system in the end where you can progress, like maps and Path of Exile. And so it feels like the natural progression for an ARPG is something like Path of Exile or Last Epic, where you feel a bit stronger, a bit faster, and you have a robust way to like really dig into your character and play it fully at the end. But because Diablo 2 was kind of a pioneer of the genre, and it came out in the early 2000s, it just didn't have the time or the space. The genre hadn't evolved enough for them to know what to do. So their version was like, well, yeah, they just farm bosses and kill Bale over and over. That's our quote-unquote endgame, because endgame wasn't really even necessarily a concept at the time. So what I'm saying is like what made Diablo 2 so cool and fun was a product of the times. It might not have been this good if it came out any later.
That's why they could never recapture it, and no game has ever surpassed it, even if it's technically better in every single way. It was a right time, right place, and it just... I do think that as I've gotten older and more curmudgeon-y, that the limitations that this era, the PS2 era, so like early 2000s, 2002 kind of, was the peak of like, we have the technology to do interesting things and like development pipelines and money to make bigger projects, but the technology is still so rudimentary, and there isn't the accountants aren't involved in the creative process about like, what does the long term look like? Like, will our players stay engaged after X amount of time?
Yeah,
like that.
Nobody cared about that back then. It was like, you play our game or you don't.
Nobody knew that there was money to be made in this, or a lot of money to be made. So it was designed purely as a, like, games aren't designed to be played once anymore, and I think that's Diablo 2's strength, is kind of like, what if this game is designed to be, like, once you beat Hell, you can keep getting loot, but the game doesn't encourage you to, in my opinion. Like, maxing out, that feels like a community, like a internally driven desire. The game doesn't ask you to do it. Like, after you beat Hell, the game doesn't like acknowledge anything else you do.
No,
maxing, and I like there isn't a fancy reward for maxing out. Like, getting to level 99 was almost like it was a cap for your own sanity. They're like, there's no more reason for you to keep playing. You can keep getting skill, like, they cap out the, like, by the time you're level 80, I'd say, like, your build has all the skill points it needs, and any extras, sometimes you're like, I guess I'll put it in warmth.
Yeah, there was always like a dump.
I always remember it as my Hammerden, like, that was the highest level character I'd ever gotten to. It was mid to high 80s, but like, I didn't need levels anymore. I just wanted to get to level 90 because that would be the highest level character I ever had, and I just wanted to do more damage and clear the things faster. It's like the way that speedrunners find joy out of a game is never because the game usually is like, oh, play the speedrun mode. It was just like people wanted a reason to keep playing this game they loved so much. So they optimized the shit out of it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the design of that, and they were able to capture that because I feel like they weren't trying to make that. They happened to make a really awesome game that people wanted to play more of versus a game that, like, you have to play all of it. I don't know, man. It doesn't feel like I'm handcuffed to this thing. doesn't feel too long. I loved how long each of these acts. So replaying. So the one thing I actually wanted to add to your melee discussion, there are a lot of good designed areas in Act 2 that really punish spellcasters but reward melee dudes. The maggot layer to get the stat.
Perfect example.
That was a nightmare for my druid. It took
you can't do shit, dude. Fissure is useless. However,
Molten Boulder's great.
Molten Boulder is insanely good there.
But even then, it gets caught on corners and stuff like that. But if I was a werewolf, I would have just charged the fuck through there. So there is some level design that like encourages or like rewards other playstyles than just like the giant open area, biggest area effect clears map fastest. Though unfortunately, there is a lot of that.
I was going to say inversely to that. In Diablo 2, Act 2, I didn't mean to say Diablo 2. In Act 2, the tombs are a nightmare for melee because they're huge usually. Like if you're farming tombs, it's so painful to sit there and just like bash one skeleton at a time that just gets insta revived by the remnants. Like, and wading through these giant rooms. It's chock full of enemies that are constantly getting revived, and then you're getting knocked back by the fucking snakes. Yeah, melee is a nightmare. Just an hour later.
Enchanted Scarabs alone, never mind. That takes.
Yeah,
Lightning
true.
Enchanted is the most like. I hope you don't like our melee classes. I don't want to harp on it too much, but like I think ARPGs, the way isometric combat is designed is inherently anti-fun to be in melee range. Because the concept is... The offset is you need range characters to be less efficient at range.
Right.
But nobody wants to be strictly weaker, so they make them balanced. But then now the imbalance is non-measurable. It is a nebulous issue.
It is, but I will say that Diablo 2, obviously, other than, it's pretty massively lopsided towards... Hammered-in and Sorceress, like those are clearly the two strongest classes. Like you either start ladder as a Javazon because they're really easy to gear and make powerful. All you need is Titan's Revenge. Literally, that's it. And like your character is insanely strong. And then for a Sorceress, Blizzard scales so well, you basically don't even need items, and you just build Sorceress and Blizzard and teleport, and you can farm, P3 Mephisto, Hell Mephisto if you want to. So those characters did dominate, but there is definitely a place in the game for melee. Like, I saw plenty of, Fury Werewolves. I saw plenty of Werebears. I saw plenty of,
my Whirlwind,
Barbs.
Barbarian. Yeah, I had Immortal Kings full IKs. Like, I for sure.
And his war cries give him a very specific use. Obviously, you can get Call to Arms, the rune word, but, Barbarians just naturally being able to skill out into the war cries and the amount of passive buffs they had. They had an entire skill tree dedicated to passively buffing themselves. You get like basically for free, you get all res, gigantic defense, movement speed. They did a good job of making melee characters feel like beasts. They just don't have good clear, and that's a problem with the. Anyways.
I do think what's really nice about the pacing is that, like, when I think by Act 2, you start to get, like, what would be probably, like, your main skill, or you're starting to pump up your main skill, and now it's starting to be really powerful. Yeah. So you're starting to really feel, like, the power scaling, and then by Act 3, I think you have, like, the cooldown move, or a secondary, you have some passives build up, and, like, you're starting to really feel powerful, and by the time you're at Diablo, I feel like all your skills are locked in. They're obviously not max, but like, because most builds aren't the level 30 skill. I know there are some, but I don't think most of them are.
Well, let's think.
Or because like,
we could go through the whole list.
My druid, like just for example, my druid, I could have picked Molten Boulder or Fissure or Tornado.
Fissure
as my like.
Yeah, Fissure is the highest damaging ability for a fire druid. So your build starts to pop at level 12 when you get Fissure.
Mm-hmm. And like I felt it, dude.
Yeah, you can feel how strong it is.
And what's really great about Fissure is it makes Armageddon last 2 more seconds per skill rank. So like you cast Armageddon. I think mine at level 1, it lasts like I don't know, it was like 80 seconds or something. It's
Armageddon
really long.
is usually a 1-point wonder. Yeah.
It's so good.
So,
But so I think that that's something that's really subtle. Is like I feel like the axe and the skill range is paced so nicely that like it feels like each act I do feel a noticeable spike in my own strength, and not just from numbers.
yeah, you bring that up. So let's bring some structure to this nonsense that we're spouting out here. I have some key points I want to hit. Pacing is one of them. Let's talk about the pacing of the game then, since you just brought it up. I think my single favorite section, I'll call it, because it's not a moment, but it's like a small period of time. My single favorite part of the game is going from nightmare to hell, I think.
Oh. Never would have pieced
No, maybe it's from normal to nightmare. Yeah, it's normal. It's normal to nightmare. No, it's normal to nightmare because after you're done farming Bale, you're usually around like level, I don't know, 40 to 50, which means you start getting to put on a lot of your cool uniques. Like Titan's Revenge is required level 42. So you farm Bale, you hit those early 40s, you put on Titan's Revenge, suddenly your character spikes in power, you put on your Viper Magi at level, I think, 38. You get these all res, you get cast speed, all skills. Like, your character just starts scaling power massively when you hit the 40s. And what's contributing to this as well is the fact that, especially for a Javazon, Lightning Fury is a level 30 skill. So that is your bread and butter skill for a Javazon. So unfortunately, that character does only start to pop off once you learn that skill. But now that you're level 40, 45, 50, suddenly you've maxed out, or at least put a bunch of points into Lightning Fury, and you can feel your power scaling exponentially. And you kill Bale in normal, and you go to Nightmare, and just restarting the game for the first time, but with this crazy power level, it's so fucking satisfying and fun. And I just love that part of the game. Absolutely love it.
I think one of my favorite moments that I can remember to basically is around that same window, but in an entirely different way, was seeing the first unique, like, quilted armor.
Oh, yeah.
But the tier 2 quilted armor, what do they called it? Like ghost fur or something
armor.
Like that?
Yeah.
Ghost armor, and seeing that and just being like, oh my god, they have unique names.
Yeah.
Like, that was such an exciting.
tier.
It's so funny that it's like, I was excited to reskin, but like, there was something exciting about being able to see a slight change to, like, what does Nightmare look like now? That's different. I didn't expect that to be different, you know?
Yeah, new areas will show, or new enemies will show up in areas, right? That was always fun.
And enemies are recolored in some ways. Like, these are like real little subtle things that like made the Nightmare experience. Like, the name actually kind of implies like this is a darker, twisted version, and it's not just like new. I don't know. It was different than anything I had ever experienced up to that point. And I don't want to say that Diablo like pioneered, or I feel like maybe they pioneered the like new, like, you do multiple runs. I'm sure other games did it before, but it's the one that I always think of, like, at least in the ARPG genre for sure.
I don't actually know the history of New Game Plus, but I did, as you're alluding to, it feels like Diablo 2 was the first New Game Plus, where I don't know. I'm just like smiling, saying, the nostalgia is thinking here, thinking about it.
It's even better than like a New Game Plus, because that just implies you carry over stuff. But this feels like this is Diablo 2 2.
Yeah,
this is the game now. Like, and it's balanced, and it's like they finished the first game, and here's the first expansion pack in terms of like balancing and scale. I know it's not new content, but it feels new in terms of like now you're engaging the beginning parts with like end game difficulty level stuff, and your build is in. This is what the game would feel like. I don't know. It's totally a different experience. It's so good.
Yeah, it really is. And another thing too is Act 1. I think this will actually circle back nicely. We're talking about pacing of the game. The moment where you kill Bale and you restart the game, you know, you've spent so many hours trudging through normal mode, leveling up your character, trying to increase your power, hoping you get some good uniques to like flesh out your build. And you go through Act 2, through 3, through 4, through 5, you're seeing all these different biomes and areas, and it's so cool. and then you restart the game in Nightmare. The town music hits you when you spawn back into the rogue encampment, but now, instead of being like a scared pants pissing level 1 where you're like, oh my fucking god, are these zombies outside gonna kill me? Am I gonna be able to even clear the den of evil? Oh shit. It's like, you know what the fuck's up, but there's still a familiarity because it's Act 1 again. You love that music. You go outside of town, rogue encampment, and you're like, all right, I'm about to fuck everybody up. And the first pack of Fallen come up to you and you just eviscerate them. Like, that restart is just, it's so satisfying and it's so fun and rewarding.
But I know what it makes.
I don't know.
I know this sounds like a tangent, but I'm gonna we'll cycle back to it, and I love how different that experience is than when you start hell mode, because I feel like it's like this false level of confidence.
Yeah,
you go out there and you throw a fireball, and the Fallens don't move because they're immune to fire.
Like, oh shit!
Oh no!
Yeah.
So I love how like Nightmare is almost like the power fantasy version of your first playthrough, and
that's
then
a really good point.
The third version is like the hard mode.
Yeah, it's a
and like
humbling
I don't know.
again.
I think that's
a really good point.
It's so different, and like it the torment modes of Diablo 3, like having like 19, Jesus, like it just doesn't capture like and like all of, I think a lot of modern action RPGs, and that's why I think I loved Grim Dawn so much. It has a very similar kind of nightmare hell for them too. God, I love Grim Dawn so much.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I just wanted to highlight that. I think that was a cool change. But
that's another ARPG that I sadly did not mention. Titan Quest, of course, one of the GOATs, and Grim Dawn. Those two games they feel much more like they captured the spirit of Diablo 2 as an ARPG.
Those feel like when you put a spiritual successor to Diablo 2, I'm like, yes, that's what that should. Grim Dawn to me feels like the closest. Like, it feels like what Path of Exile said it was going to be on the box. It ended up being. It is like the spiritual successor, but it goes a different direction. This truly feels like, what if the Diablo 2 team came together and they had to remake Diablo 2, but it had to be their own universe. Like, make it again.
It definitely, like, I can still hear the town music in Grim Dawn in my head, even though I haven't played that game in probably 6 years, which I'm embarrassed to admit, but talking about it might get me to go back.
New expansion's coming out this year.
Is it really?
Yeah, wow, dude. Okay. I don't know what happened, but yeah, they're coming out with an expansion.
That's sweet.
So
yeah, Crate Entertainment, because they did make Titan Quest as well, and then the something happened. The company kind of fractured, and the old head of the department formed his new studio, which was Crate Entertainment, and then they made Grim Dawn. So the guy who made Titan Quest then also made Grim Dawn. So it's like he clearly has his finger on the pulse of what makes ARPGs good.
Which is the pacing in Diablo 2.
Yes, the pacing.
Which, let me tell
Grim Dawn
you.
is a little bit faster, and Diablo 2, it is a little bit slow in the beginning, but I don't know. I love it. I like walking out into the wildy and just having your one weapon, and you gotta bash the zombie 6 times to kill it, but you get a big chunk of experience, and you're like, oh my god, oh yes, and that first level up.
Hear me out on this. If you think about action games, there's Devil May Cry's. That's what I think of, like a lot of modern action RPGs, where it is flashy as fuck, and the people that are good at it, like, don't get touched, and you're just like, I can't play that. And then there's Dark Souls, where every action is slow and deliberate and boring looking, or not as flashy, but like every combat is much more intentional and much more at stake. That's kind of the energy I get from like Diablo 2. I hate comparing it to Dark Souls, but it is that type of the spirit of the slow, and every encounter isn't something you should take lightly. You are supposed to look at the enemy in the eye a little bit. Keep an eye out. When you see that pack, you're like, that might be too many people, or like, you don't just blindly throw shit.
Yeah, or you do engage with it, and if they like, in 2 hits, you're at a quarter HP, and you're like, okay,
having
these
4 enemies around you is actually like, okay, I need to make sure only one can touch me at a time, or else I'm going to die.
Yeah, like fighting Rakanishu and finding him in the stony fields. He is one of the first kind of spikes in difficulty. Because he's lightning enchanted, so as you're hitting him, he's just retaliating for free and getting massive damage on you. He runs at the fucking speed of light. You can't catch the little bastard, and then when you do, like, he keeps running and you hit him, but he's dealing damage to you anyway. He's so frustrating, but it's so fun, and it's it's an introduction to that. Like, you got to be careful which enemies you think you can beat or attack blindly. I'm sad I don't remember his name, but the big gargantuan group, Tree Fist, that guards the
Darkwood, yes, that's
Darkwood.
Tree Fist.
Yeah, like those guys will beat the
God.
shit out of you if you're not careful too when you're first running through the game and you don't know what you're doing. If you're really starting like a, fresh new character, new ladder, new whatever, and you have nothing, no twink gear. Yeah, like you definitely have these spikes in difficulty, and it's really fun to overcome that. And it continues throughout the game. Nightmare, like you said, is sort of a reward. It's like, okay, you want to feel the power fantasy of a character really coming alive. That's kind of the whole Nightmare mode. I don't ever remember struggling on Nightmare. Your character...
It's like once you're properly geared to start it, I think it's balanced well to kind of like keep you at that level of difficulty for the most part.
Yeah, so... Yeah, it does have that Dark Souls kind of spirit where it feels really deliberate, the difficulty, and that's what just makes the pacing of the game so good and fun and timeless. It's still so fun to play. Now, let's move on from this. I have a bunch of words written down of just topics I want to touch on. Something we have to talk about that we're 30 minutes into the podcast and we haven't even mentioned is the atmosphere of the game.
It's okay, I guess.
Yeah, it's all right. All right,
is what I'd say if I was lying.
Yeah, that's what I'd say.
That is something that also holds up so well.
Yeah.
Even the remaster, I'm really impressed with how well they were managed to just like HDify that atmosphere instead of like trying. It's very good.
Yeah, the Diablo 2 is a really, really, really good example of art direction being able to carry a game far past its graphic fidelity. Something like the Souls games, too. Even when Elden Ring came out, by modern standards, it's pretty ugly, graphically. Like, it's kind of... Things just don't look clean and good and modern. It looks like the game was made in, 2010 and has been developed forever and finally came out. But the thing is, Elden Ring is stunningly beautiful because of the art direction, the landscapes, the sky boxes, the character design, the enemy design, the weapon design, the skill design. All of that stuff is so unbelievably amazing that it hard carries the game, and you don't even care that the fidelity of the graphics might be a bit low compared to a modern 2020 kind of game. And Diablo 2 to me is one of those. You can still, to me anyway, I know it is like quite pixely now. Which, by the way, the remaster toggle, I don't know why, but it's fucked up. If you go back to the original graphics in the remaster, the graphics are worse. And I don't know if it's something sly they're trying to do where they're like, see how ugly this game used to look? And made it look even worse. But if you load up actual Diablo 2, the original Diablo 2, it does not look as bad as the old school toggled graphics in the remaster. It's just a weird little thing.
You don't want to hear my actual opinion is I bet you they tried to like basically take their remastered game and turned off their HD effects. So it looks different than how the original game would look in the original source code.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think it's like, it just, they're turning off graphics isn't a true turn on Diablo 2 standard. You know?
There's something...
It probably should be labeled something else, but yeah.
There's something funky there, but the graphics look worse. So if you load up the actual Diablo 2, it definitely looks old now, right? Obviously, it's almost 25 years old, but it's still beautiful because of the art direction. The way they designed the areas, the tile sets they chose and how they developed them, the way that they crafted everything, it just hits different, as they say. Going into the jail, when you're, for the first time, going into the jail in Act 1 and seeing, like, these tortured rogues strung up on the walls and these corpses and shit, and it's so dank and it's so fucking dark, and, like, light radius actually matters. I mean, light radius is a meme stat at this point because it's still in, for instance, Path of Exile, even though the whole screen is brightly lit the whole time. It's literally just a wasted affix. However, in Diablo 2... light radius actually kind of matters because it's super, super dark. And yeah, I don't know. I have so many distinct memories of seeing areas for the first time, even after 20 years. It just blows me away. The atmosphere in Diablo 2 is just, it's kind of unrivaled.
Something I'm going to highlight is truly I paid attention to how much work there is in the backgrounds that's like not interactable objects. And Diablo 2 might be truly the most horrific universe I've seen created in a video game in terms of like the sheer depravity of the state of that world is the most I've ever bought into Hell on Earth. Because most Hell on Earth games are like, all demons are everywhere, so there are no humans left, so it's just a playground for you to kill people. Where this is, it constantly reminds you of the humanity that was here, or is being taken advantage of, or the slow decay of an individual person. Like, seeing the palace in Act 2 as you go towards Arcane Sanctuary is very similar. Like, at first it's just like these women that were like there, that are just like entertainment, that are just like now being thrown across the room, and it's just like, God, it is so graphic, but it's so zoomed out that you don't feel the like the grossness of that. Like, it's there to create a sense of danger and not supposed to gross you. It's not there to shock you. Like, look at this gore, look how fucked up it is, as much as like, this is the world that you're in, that this is the background noise. Like, that's just the like kind of tension and sense that like, this is the last hope. Like, if you die, all right, well, the world's over.
Yeah, that's very, very well said. Yeah, that's...
But I didn't even get to my main point, which is, in this world, what I love about the tile sets is there's so few that remind me of, like, what I envisioned is Hell. Like, there's just so many varied spots. Like, the Arcane Sanctuary, Act 2, the amount of non-desert locations you get from that desert. Act 3, the amount of what? I don't think I've seen an interesting jungle before. And, like, Act 4 is, like, an act, like, when you're not in the River of Flame. That general, like, I don't even know if I could describe that landscape to some. It's so unique and weird.
Yeah, it is weird. It's, it feels like purgatory to me or something, where it's not...
Yeah, it's like pre...
Yeah, it's like pre-hell.
It's like a world in which like, ain't God, you know, like, gods are creating a place for future creatures to inhabit. Like, they're building this place. Like, it's not done yet. That's how it feels to me. Like, it's not meant for mortals yet. It's still being made. It's still being crafted out of the earth, and it's, I don't know. It's so cool. And then Act 5 is...
I love Act 5.
I don't know how to classify it, because, like, now knowing it, it definitely does feel like you are visiting, like, the mountains.
Yeah.
But, like, as a kid, I couldn't place it. Like, that was the only act, like, it feels weird coming after Act 4, I guess. It's kind of like the only, like, weird thing of, like, Act 4 feels like the final act of a story when you come to locations, and then you kind of come back to, like, mountainsides and frost caves, but then you obviously get to the, you know, Pandemonium Fortress, and it's much more in line with that stuff.
Well, Act 5...
I didn't love... Act 5 is my least favorite.
Oh my god.
Visually. I'll say it. I don't think it's bad, it's just my least favorite.
Act 5 is my favorite. No, Act 1 is my favorite, then it's Act 5, and then it goes 4, 2, 3. I guess, visually... I'm kind of rating them. I'm rating them how much I enjoy playing them more than visually.
Yeah, and like I think visually is how I'm trying to rate them, because like Act 2 is my least favorite to play through, but it's not my least favorite to like
look at
the different areas.
I think Act 1 is simple, but I I do just love the way it looks. The kind of
I'm with you.
It's something about just the marshes and the empty plains, and it's dark. It starts to introduce you, like you were describing before, to this horrific world, but it still feels kind of like home or something, you know? Like, it still feels familiar and peaceful, but then it's populated with monsters, and then you go in the caves and you start to see, like what's actually inhabiting this world, and then eventually you make it to the underground passage, and I don't know. Act 1 probably is my favorite visually, and it's just such a good start to a game. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
and then it's
what I think
anyways,
there's a reason a lot of games copy Diablo 1's Act 1 start, is all.
You know what? Yeah, most games copy the formula completely. There's the marshy plains act, there's the desert act, there's the jungle act. Almost every single ARPG does that at this point.
Yeah.
So yeah, visually, I think Act 5 still is my favorite. I don't know why. I absolutely love the snowy mountain ranges and the ice caves and the throne room and the Worldstone Keep. It feels so grand. I guess I haven't thought about it a ton, and it's hard to kind of place why I like it so much, but I just really, really love Act 5. Gives me a lot of nostalgia too. I love the music. Yeah, I really like Act 5.
I thought it was pretty cool.
The music too is something we could talk about, although we've touched on it, but the music in Diablo 2 is utterly legendary. The Tristram theme is like, I genuinely, unironically listen to the Diablo 2 soundtrack just because it is so good and atmospheric, and I will often put it on while playing different games. Like, I'll mute the music in Path of Exile and I'll play the soundtrack from Diablo 2, or I'll mute the music in, whatever I'm playing and just play the Diablo 2 soundtrack because it's that good.
Jeez, wow. I know that Tristram truly does have, like, kind of the soundtrack of all time. Yeah. I'll give you that.
Yeah, but as we mentioned before, we aren't quite educated enough to talk about music, so, we can talk about gameplay. I know we've sort of touched on it here and there. We talked about Melee, but we haven't, I feel like, maybe gotten gritty with how we feel about the gameplay, and I want to talk about it. I want to talk about specific archetypes as well, and how different characters can feel building one tree to the next. So, something you talked about earlier was going from a werewolf druid to a fire druid. In my most recent playthrough of the Diablo 2 Resurrected, the remaster of the game, I played a fire druid because they buffed it a lot. They reduced the cooldown between uses of skills, and they just made skills stronger, made Armageddon better, all this stuff. And when you play it, you really feel like just a harbinger of flame. It is so cool. I wish games would bring back, like, 1 to 3 second cooldowns of skills. It makes the rotation so fucking satisfying and fun. And I hate... This is something that Blizzard just adopted, which I really hate. I mean, Blizzard has obviously fallen from grace, and it's a shell of a company it used to be. But the obsession with the long fucking cooldowns. They did it in Diablo 3, and they did it in Diablo 4, and I fucking despise it. And it's just MMO-style bullshit, where you have your ultimate, your big splashy move that's on a 70-second cooldown. It's like, I'm playing an ARPG where I'm seeing 5 different screens within 10 seconds because I'm just blowing everything up. Like, what makes you think I want a skill that's got a 70 fucking second cooldown? It's so opposite to how naturally you want to play like an ARPG.
It's a MOBA thing.
Yeah,
almost.
MOBA or MMO. Yeah, it is very MOBA-esque. It's also MMO-esque, the longer cooldowns.
Oh, for sure, the MMO parts I remember, but look, I'm used to 5-minute cooldowns in MMOs.
Sure, it's a little different. Yeah, no, you're right. It is closer to a MOBA. Good point.
Yeah, I do. That's one thing I was actually going to say. My big problem with ARPGs is when there's no cooldown, I feel like I don't understand how I'm supposed to play a class that isn't just one ability.
Right,
like,
and that's...
If there are no cooldowns, why am I weaving unless I run out of mana? Like,
now,
I don't
that's
know.
Path of Exile's kind of problem. That's why 2-button builds have become such a meme, because every single skill in the game does not have a cooldown. So the whole point is to just, like, build into the one skill that you can infinitely spam and cast literally 10 to 20 times per second. That's how fast your attack speed and cast speed gets eventually, where your attack speed is 0.12 seconds, so you can cast this thing 9 times in 1 second. So, yeah, that's why 2-button builds are kind of a meme, and they tried to bring that back in Path of Exile 2, and guess what? They kind of fucking failed. It's still a 1-button game. Anyways, not talking about Path of Exile. There are still 1-button builds in Diablo 2, of course. And a lot of builds are actually one button builds, but you still have utility skills, which I really like. And I want to talk about the Fire Druid specifically because I think that is one of the most beautifully designed classes. And now it's only amazing because of the remaster, unfortunately, in Resurrected. In Diablo 2, the cooldown for Volcano was way too long to really like use it consistently, and the cooldown for like Molten Boulder and Fissure was really really long for a skill that you want to kind of spam, so it just didn't feel good. But in Diablo 2 Resurrected, what I was championing earlier was the 1 to 3 second cooldowns. The way that you can kind of piano keyboard your skills with a Fire Druid is so fun. Like, you throw down Fissure as a baseline, put that on cooldown, immediately throw out like a Molten Boulder to create fire and blow up and deal fire damage. And then if there's an elite or something, you pop your Volcano underneath the elite's feet, and by then, Fissure has now come back off cooldown, so you can cast Fissure again, and just the way you cycle through these earth-opening elemental fire skills, like, I felt so fucking cool playing the Fire Druid in Diablo 2 in my most recent playthrough. It was so satisfying. I really just... it was so cool. It was so cool.
Well, I guess I didn't... I'm glad you got to mention all that, because I didn't know that they had touched up on, like, the cooldowns between abilities, because I thought it was such a perfect, like, sweet spot between, like, especially even once you get Armageddon, where it's like, okay, I have Armageddon, I have to, like, refresh that, but then, you know, you throw up your Volcano and drop a Fissure, and then, you know, you Molten Boulder until the Fissure's out, and then the Volcano, like, it's timed pretty nicely where you're kind of, like, spinning a bunch of plates in the air. That's, like, as a long-time World of Warcraft player, there's a lot of, like, builds that Blizzard kind of do, and one of them is like the spinning plate, and that one is really fun. Is trying to maintain this, instead of buffs in this case, it's like horrendous natural disasters as you're unflowing in full rooms, and I just love that it is the excitement of a the summon builds, where it's basically you have a bunch of little attacks flying out from you at any point, where like no enemy, like the whole room is being attacked without you touching, without it being like just a giant AoE. You know, it's like, I don't know. It's slightly different and hard to articulate, but that's what this fire build is like. It's instead of just like one giant, you know, AoE where everything in this one circle gets decimated, it's just like the entire screen is the target, and you never know what spots are getting hit next. So it feels kind of like a minion build in a lot of ways, but more reliable.
Interesting way to put it. Yeah, So that, you know, you saying it feels like a sweet spot in the spinning plates build, that's a really good way to describe it. That is thanks to Visceral Games that made Diablo 2 Resurrected, because they shortened the cooldowns just enough that spinning plate thing is way more satisfying, because it was just way too slow before. You basically like threw out a Volcano and your Fissure, and then you just spammed Molten Boulder 3, 4, 5 times until the others came off cooldown, and then you casted, you know, Fissure and Volcano again, and then spam Molten Boulder, and it was really not fun. But they tightened up those cooldowns, and now it's very, very satisfying.
That makes so much more sense, and like why, and it feels like that's definitely what they wanted. It felt like none of those moves were supposed to be a spam. It does feel like Molten Boulder is basically what you can use while the other moves are like doing their things. It doesn't feel like a move they want you actively like only
it's
using,
filler,
or like you use this most of the time.
But then on the exact opposite of that is you have the cold Hurricane Druid, where you cast Hurricane. It's a giant AoE around you that just slows everything down and does periodic damage, and then you just spam tornadoes. Tornado. That's all you do. You just spam tornado. So, you know, on the complete flip side of that coin of managing these spinning plates, you then just have the spammy build. And it's still satisfying and fun because you have a couple different pieces working, right? You have your Hurricane, you have your Tornado. If you get hit, then you need to maintain your Cyclone armor to make sure that you can still tank hits. You got to make sure that your Heart of the Oak stays alive, that your Grizzly stays up. Like, you got to manage a bunch of different things, but it's mostly still a spammy build. Now you have something like a Lightning Fury Javazon, where all you do is throw lightning fury javelins, and it's still really satisfying to watch it pierce through enemies and splinter and fork and auto target all nearby enemies and just clear out entire screens with this explosion of lightning. It's super satisfying.
And what's awesome about those types of builds too is like those are the builds that like the weaker you are, the way the gameplay kind of works is like you then have to just be way more like aware of your surroundings and like find your spots where you can throw some and then reposition, then throw some, and then as you get stronger, the reward is like I don't have to reposition as much, and like I'm getting through the things faster, and then you feel so powerful when it's just like entire rooms don't even get a chance to see you coming. So like that's the other kind of nice thing about that one. It's like ironically, the better you are, the less you have to think.
Yeah, well, like maybe that's the opposite of ironic. That's exactly what you do think. The better you are, the less you have to think. Oh, the better you are at the game, the less you have to think about being good at the game. Yes, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, I guess the greater point is just that the skills in the game are very satisfying. I guess we haven't talked specifically about the skills. We've talked more about gameplay, but the skills in the game are very satisfying. There's tons and tons and tons of different builds. I mean, there's at least probably 2 viable builds per class, and there's 9 classes. So, wait, there is 9,
and
right?
I think
or no, there's 7. There's only 7.
There's 7, but I'd say that you're being under generous when you say 2. I think like think about a sorceress. How many could I know? At least 2, sure. But then like druid, I think there's at least 3.
Well, let's go through the characters. Hold on, this will be fun. Let's start on the left. Amazon. Bow builds are still kind of shit. They're pretty much only good for PvP. Use guided arrow. They've tried to buff them over the years, but they're still not super good. If you heavily invest into an Amazon and fill your inventory with charms, physical damage and attack rating charms, you can make like a multi-shot build pretty dang good. You know, it can clear cows really easily, and it's also good in PvP, and it's good at boss farming because of guided arrow. So if we're talking unlimited budget viable builds, Amazon has bow build, javelin build. So just 2.
Yeah, I guess that their third skill tree is probably the worst in the
it's
game.
Just it's insanely good. But passive dodge, passive pierce, passive crit.
Look, that shows how much Amazon I played, okay?
It's insanely good. But yeah, like freezing arrow, Amazon doesn't really exist. Immolation arrow doesn't really. Explosive arrow is not great. So you really just have like multi-shot and lightning fury. Then for assassin, you have lightning traps. I know that they tried to buff fire traps, but I still don't think they're endgame viable. You have lightning traps and martial arts. That's it, especially with the mosaic keyword that kind of cured fixed martial arts. Do you know the mosaic keyword they introduced in?
Absolutely not. You probably have told me once, but I don't remember it.
It's a claw, and it has a 50% chance to not consume the charges for your martial arts skills.
Oh,
so if you dual wield them, guess what? It's a 100% chance not to consume the charges. So you build up the charges, and you just dragonfly kick, just infinitely teleport to packs of mobs and blow up all of your charges, and they never go away.
Cool as hell.
And so the game then becomes maintaining your charges and then exploding entire screens. People, it's a bit contentious. People think it kind of ruined the assassin because you cannot play martial arts without these claws, and that's staggeringly powerful how much stronger you are with the claws.
You have to actively choose to be weak to play other play styles. Okay.
But still, fair. Like the Trap Assassin is still insanely good. Definitely competes because of the range.
Are there 2 types of Trapped Assassins? I thought there was
like I said, there's fire.
Explosion. No,
well, that's no.
Or is that considered?
Yeah, what you do is you lay down 4 lightning sentries and 1 death sentry, and you use the death sentry to proc corpse explosion because it's huge physical damage and it does a % of the corpse's damage. So like your lightning sentries kill stuff, your death sentry pops the corpses to do big chunks of damage. It's really good.
So I guess that is one build.
It's one build.
Okay.
Then you have the Necromancer. He might have the most builds. You have Bone Spear. You have Poison Nova. You have Summon build. You have
Corpse.
Corpse Explosion is just woven into every build, really, because it's high up on the.
Curse. There's not like a curse build, no curse right? Build. You just have curses.
But it does have 3 very strong viable builds.
And there's no Bone Spirit, right? That's a bait.
Bone Spirit is good, but yeah, it's mostly PvP or like maybe sniping a boss. But your Bone Spear becomes so strong you don't really need it.
So there's three.
And there's even 2 types of summoning builds, really. You can focus super hard on bone skeleton mages, because they buffed them. Wait, no, am I conflating that with, like, a mod? I think I am. Yeah, never mind. There's just the summon build. Barbarian. You have Berserk and Whirlwind. Maybe
not leap attack.
Maybe weapon throw, but I don't think so. That's something I briefly hinted at earlier, but hadn't fully talked about. Was in all of my thousands of hours played, there's still archetypes I literally never played. I never ever played a Hammerdin, which is crazy. I know, because it's the most powerful build in the game. I never fucking played it.
It kind of makes sense when you think that was the peak of me and you playing together, and like. There's almost the same reason I never played in Amazon's, like, you were, like, peak Amazon there, so it felt like I was playing one by proxy. It's kind of almost like, I usually pick the next character I play is one that I have, like, no familiar, I wanted a completely new experience, so, like, that's kind of why I shied away from, usually from classes that you would, like, I never play, like, rogue-type characters or, you know, stealthy characters, for kind of similar reasons, but... Any case,
yeah,
you never played a Hammerdin.
I know we had an interesting dichotomy too. Like you said, you mostly played the characters I didn't play, so it was cool that we touched. Like you played the Summon, Necro, and Hammerdin. That's kind of what I remember you playing, and I never touched those. So then you have Paladin, which is you can do Zeal, you can do Hammer, you can kind of do Fist of the Heavens. With certain rune words, there is a Fire Oradin that works if you have a massive budget and can buy the best items in the game. So Paladin's pretty good. Then you have Sorceress, which is you just have Lightning, Fire, Ice, Lightning, Fire, Cold.
So I'm actually, now that you're going through it, what you're basically saying is there's a good build in every skill tree that has, like, active skills.
Kind of, and some have 2, right? Like the Paladin, it has Fist of the Heavens and there's a Smiteadin too, of course, for Ubers. So, of course, Paladins are the most versatile. They have like 5 super good viable builds. But yeah,
and everyone wants a Paladin in the group because of the auras, anyway.
Yeah, the auras, and yeah, so Paladins are super versatile. They can do literally everything in the game. That's why they're good. But then, for instance, like the Sorceress, you just use Lightning. There's not a Chain Lightning build. It's just Lightning. That's all you use. And Cold Sorceress, you could go Frozen Orb. But even in the clear department, because it's so much weaker than Blizzard, you're better off just using Blizzard and hitting less enemies at once, but killing them faster. That's kind of the trade-off. So, like Blizzard Sorceress, there is a Frozen Orb that's decent, but you mostly just play Blizzard. And then there's also Fireball mixed with Hydra. You can go a Fireball Hydra hybrid build, but you could also just go Fireball. So that's kind of 2 builds. The Forb build, the Frozen Orb, and then, I don't know, Sorceress probably has 4. And then last is the Druid. You have Fury Werewolf.
At least 4.
Fury Werebear. I believe, like, the Fireclaw Werebear kind of works, or Shockwave, maybe. And then, yeah, you have Hurricane Druid and Fire Druid. Tornado Druid, Fire Druid. Yeah. So
I think you're right. Then so it's at least 2. In fact, most have 2, but couple have 3. And
yeah, even
then you
some
have, like,
4.
the Druid.
Yeah. Now, a lot of those builds, there's questions of. So I wanted to circle back just briefly, talk about this for a second. The kind of end game of Diablo 2. Something that we didn't talk about was P8 farming. That's kind of a goal. So, for instance, like a goal for me usually was trying to farm P8 cows, and P8 means player 8. So what you can do is modify the difficulty in the game in the settings, where the game treats it as if there are 8 players in the game when you are by yourself. And what increasing players does is it increases the health of the monsters, just the overall difficulty, health and damage, but it also increases your magic find, which makes finding better items more likely. So a goal you can have is farming like P8 bale, doing P8 bale runs, and doing P8 cow runs solo. So it's the hardest it can possibly be, but it also is the highest amount of magic find it can possibly be, and you have the greatest chance of finding really good items. And if you can do it by yourself, it's amazing. So Like P8 Hell cow farming is something that I tried to do with Javazons usually, because that's what they excelled at. And then Blizzard Sorceress was pretty good at that as well. And then Hammerdins usually excelled at the P8 Bale farm, because, you know, the enemies just spawn directly on top of you in that little pack, and you just spam your hammers, and they all just kind of pop immediately. So
you can have them pre-spammed.
Yeah, that's kind of the end game of Diablo 2, where you can beat Hell, and if you keep leveling up and farming, you can increase the player count over time. Eventually, you can start farming like player 3 Mephisto, where he has high, you know, he's a bit harder, but he's going to drop better stuff. And then eventually you can go to P5 and then P7. And because I think technically P7 is the only one that matters. Once you hit P8, you don't get any more magic find, I believe. They just get harder, but you don't actually get more magic.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, it's a weird, like, I don't know if it's a glitch in the system, but 3, 5, and 7 are the big, like, hallmarks, landmarks, whatever you want to call them, where the magic find is a significant bump. So that's usually what you farm, is P3, P5, or P7, depending on how good your character is. So that's kind of the end game, but it does get boring, right? Doing cows for the fucking trillionth time, killing Bale for the trillionth time, like, it's just kind of boring. So that's usually when I made new characters. I would beat Hell, I'd probably try to farm up to about P3, I'd maybe find some cool gear for a different character, and then I would just go make that character instead. Like, oh, I'd find, you know, Brutus's Claw, and then I would go, okay, it's time to roll in a Trap Assassin now, since I have one of these, and then you'd go to a Trap Assassin. That's how I usually played the game. I didn't super crazy farm endgame. Like, I never had a, you know, infinity on my mercenary with Griffin's Eye Lightning Sorceress. Like, I just never had that. I didn't have the patience to farm all of that stuff and try to find the trades and whatever. So I would just find good gear, have fun, and then re-roll a new character. That's how I've played Diablo my entire life, was get to like high 80s, low 90s, and then re-roll a character once I had decent gear for it. So anyways, that was me circling back to the end game and like how you can play Diablo 2. What we could talk about now is, we've been talking for what, an hour or more now? Yeah, hour 7. We could start talking about items. This is a very contentious topic. I guess maybe not contentious. Maybe it's contentious for modern games, because every single ARPG in the history of mankind gets compared to Diablo 2, because the item hunt in Diablo 2 was perfect. Literally perfect. And again, this might be a product of the time. I don't know how they got the item hunt as perfect as they did in this game, but it is unrivaled.
So why don't you tell me, as someone who's experienced significantly more item hunting, what's different about Diablo 2's version of it? Because, like, I've only really played Titan Quest, Grim Dawn, and this in terms of item hunting. So I only have, like, 2 game engines worth of exposure, really. Okay. And, like, Diablo 3 and 4 don't count. Like, those have, like, infinitely rare items, or all of it doesn't. I don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so what's special about Diablo 2?
So what's special about Diablo 2 is that you can find items on normal mode on your first playthrough that you can use until the end of the game. And that is because of the way that they made uniques roll, and because of the way that they balanced magic items and rare items. They did something really, really smart and special, and that's what makes Diablo 2 so amazing, is that there are affixes that can only roll on magic items that cannot roll on rare items. So the difference is, magic items have less affixes, right? Usually it'll only roll with 2 or 3 affixes, whereas rare items can get up to 6 affixes. So the rare items are rarer, but the double-edged sword to that is that they also have the most affixes they can roll, right? So they can be the best items, but that also means they can be some of the worst items, because they have so many affixes they can roll, they can just roll a collection of complete garbage. And it's kind of like more chances for an item to get fucked up, if you want to think of it that way. But it's not quite like that. I'm just kind of exaggerating for my point.
It's a much higher highs but much lower lows.
Yes.
But the lows are way easier to hit.
Yes. However, magic items can roll higher tiers of affixes, but in less quantity. So what that means is, for instance, I'll give an example. There are magic gloves, specifically magic gloves, that are considered best in slot for Javazons. because they can roll 3 to your skills instead of only 2. And rare gloves can only roll +2 to skills, where magic gloves can roll +3 to skills. So what'll happen is you'll try to find magic gloves that give +3 to all of your javelin skills and 20% increased attack speed. Whereas a rare glove can only roll 2 to all of your skills. It can also roll 20% attack speed, but it can also, on top of all that, roll, life steal, mana steal, resistances, stats, etc. So the catch here is that you can find magic gloves that are technically more damage and better for your character than a rare glove could ever possibly be, no matter how well it rolled. And that's what made it so special. It was so cool that these magic items had a chance to, edge out the rare items in extremely rare circumstances. Then you had things like the Stone of Jordan, where it just was the best ring in the game, gave you 1 to all skills, it gave you mana, it gave you lightning absorb, gave you lightning damage, and it just was a required level, I think, 12. You can use Stone of Jordan? I want to double check that. That sounds too low, but I think that's right.
I feel like it was close to 30, but I also think that might be a little high.
No, you're right. It was required level 29, and it did not give...
Oh my god, I was going to say 29! Nice. Holy shit, my memory is fucked.
It did not give lightning absorb. It gave lightning damage, and it gave percent mana.
Dude, imagine lightning absorb.
Yeah.
Good god, that would be
There
insane.
is lightning absorb on stuff. I just don't remember what, but...
Yeah.
So for instance, the best ring in the entire game is level 29 requirement. So that means you can start finding it on Nightmare Andariel. She has a very high chance to drop Stone of Jordan. So the item hunt in the game was just it was just this, I don't know. I guess I just described why it was so good. Just every single item had a chance to be good at every point in the game. Let's talk about this. Rune words. We didn't even mention runes and rune words that were introduced in Diablo 2 Lord of Destruction. Rune words, so you could find these things called runes, and they socket into items. And if you socket them into an item in a specific order, it will, enchant and upgrade and turn into a rune word and have a bunch of specific stats on it. This could only be done on base white items that had the specific number of sockets. So if you wanted to make the rune word stealth, for instance, which was Tal L, 2 runes in a base white armor, it was a really, really, really good leveling gear. You had to find a base white chest armor, and it had to have 2 sockets. If it had 3 sockets, you couldn't make this rune word. If it had 1 socket, you couldn't make the rune word. It had to have 2 sockets in a base white item. So if you found a 2-socketed chest piece, but it was a blue item, you can't make the rune word. It has to be white. No affixes on it, just 2 sockets. So now suddenly, base white items have value because you need them to make these super powerful rune words. So you have base white items have value, blue items have value because they can roll the highest affixes. Then you have rare items because they just roll the most affixes and can be the best items. And then you have uniques. So items at every single tier of the game, at every single point in the game, are valuable for something. It's fucking brilliant.
It's hard to imagine that game without rune words.
Right?
But
it existed
I still
for a
can't
long
believe
time.
that no one's copied that. They themselves didn't even copy
No,
rune
they
words.
tried and they
never...
can't do it. And now recently
I
in
don't know
Diablo
why.
4 they introduced runes, and it's just a completely bastardized garbage version of I mean, it's not even the same thing. I don't know what they were thinking with these runes. They're so fucking stupid.
It's like the runes in Diablo 4 are fine, but they're not.
They're just skills.
Certainly not evoking.
Yeah.
They're not evoking runes.
Rune words. No, it's just
from Diablo
it's like nostalgia
2
bait to me. Oh, remember runes?
And I think what I think was cool is it's what they would I don't know if it's quite parallel progression. Is that it's other things you can do to progress other characters or your own that isn't a direct upgrade, right? So you're finding these resources now
too.
they're dropping, and then it lets you also build it's like crafting, I guess is a dumb way of saying it, but they somehow fit in crafting into this game.
Yeah,
but
way
it's
before,
under very hyper.
Yeah, way before crafting even existed as a concept, really, in these types of games. Which that's what kind of Path of Exile did. That's why their item hunt is decent. items, too many items drop in Path of Exile. That's known. But crafting is sort of the end game version of items in Path of Exile. And yeah, it's similar in that, like, if you find the right bases with the right stuff on it, you can manipulate these items and craft them into something really good. So it's similar, but not quite. Diablo 2, it is the perfect loot hunt. It is the perfect item gameplay.
All right. I'm going to go out and say something sacrilegious.
Let's hear it.
Diablo 3 has a lot of really good game ideas.
Okay.
What do you think about the Enchantress's reroll of an affix?
Yeah, I mean, that's great. That's simple. And you need resources for it. It scales, so it gets harder and harder to maintain, and it lets you take an item that's one-off perfect and invest more resources to make it perfect. I like the Enchantress a lot.
Would
the
that
Mystic,
have made
the Mystic
Diablo
is what it
2...
was in Diablo
the
3.
Mystic, sorry, you're right. Would that make Diablo 2 better? Would you have preferred just the exact, no modification, it is one affix and you can reroll it with a scaling cost? Would that make Diablo 2 a better loot game, do you think?
That is a wonderful question. Really good. It certainly would have changed the game. It probably would have ruined it, because the thing is, there was like a whole separate point system that the community kind of developed to determine how good items were, because you couldn't reroll an affix. So, there were perfect rings that usually weren't found. They were more theoretical. Like 6 of the exact affix you want rolled perfectly. Like, it's borderline impossible to happen. So there are rings that are like, it's got kind of 2 dud affixes on it, but then it's got 4 really good affixes, and they're all highly rolled. So this item's actually kind of worth more than this other ring that has 5 good affixes on it, but they're all kind of poorly rolled. So, like, there was this mini game that you could also play where, like, you might have less affixes, but they're stronger and better for your specific character. Or maybe you want the Jack of all trades item that's got more affixes that are kind of weaker, but it'll just make you overall stronger. So if you add a Mystic into this, re-rolling affixes, it kind of ruins that entire aspect of it.
I agree with you.
So,
something I wanted to bring up is that I recognize that as a fun thing to make the game better to play and be more powerful, but I think it does something to the overall design, balance, and structure of their loot. If everything has a wild card on it, everything becomes so much more powerful because you only ever have to hit.
Yes.
It's like, imagine doing a slot machine where there's a guaranteed wild card on every single jackpot you roll. All of a sudden, that machine's going to pay out, on average, fuck ton more money.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And, like,
I didn't, because when you think about how many pieces of gear you wear, if you have a reroll on, I don't know, let's say all non-uniques or non-rune words, right? That's like 4 or 5 rare items that get rerolled. So you kind of cheated 4 or 5 total affixes on your gear and cheated them to be something potentially better than it would have been. So yeah, there's probably a world where you, like, if I don't know, this is kind of a fun little game. I love this question. I think if we thought, how would Diablo 2 implement it? It would definitely take, like, boss essences, which have a chance to drop in Hell. So, like, Duriel and the Summoner, and I think Andariel and something else, they would have a chance to drop an essence. I don't know if you ever found those. I'm sure you did, but...
Okay, this is actually something I was hoping you would explain, because this would be explaining it to me. I'm aware of the concept. I don't actually understand any of the actual, what does it look like to summon the bosses? How does is it like how it was in Diablo 3? And you, like,
yes,
went and fought those? Okay.
You had to go kill specific bosses for them to drop keys, and then you use the keys to summon Uber portals. Then you would go kill those Uber bosses and get the Uber materials to summon the next tier of portals to go kill the best bosses in the game to get a torch, or just a torch. The Annihilus was from selling Stones of Jordan to vendors. So that was keys. That's different from essences. The essences were used to get tokens of absolution, I believe, which let you reroll a character, or it resets your stats and your skills. So fuck, maybe that's a mod again. I hope that's what they do in regular Diablo 2. Let me just look it up. Token of Absolution.
There's too many steps for it to feel like it's a mod. I feel like a mod would just like be a vendor has a new option rather than like, oh, you gotta find all these bosses.
I was correct. Yeah, you need 4 essences. It's an essence dropped by Andariel, Mephisto, Diablo, and Baal, and you combine them all and you get a Token of Absolution, which is just a character reset, which you only get a few of per character.
I was wondering how people talk. I've been watching random videos and they talk about just doing a bunch of I reset again. I'm like, how are they resetting their character 9 or 10 times?
Essences.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's something that we haven't talked about either. I don't know. I almost want this podcast to go long, but we're already on an hour 20. I don't know how much longer you want to talk about it, but I just love talking about Diablo. We'll just go by the seat of our pants, I guess, here.
Yeah, let's keep going.
So,
I got no problem.
So yeah, then you have if we were to see a re-rolling thing, I'm sure it would be Akara in Act 1. She's like the mystic. She's super cool. It would probably be something like you would need essences, probably depending on what type of affix. Like if it was a prefix, you would need maybe 2 of the essences, and then if it was a suffix, you would need 2 of the different essences. And then you probably could only re-roll it once. It would almost like corrupt it, like in Path of Exile, where it's like, it's modified, but it can never be modified again, basically. That is how I could see them implementing it in Diablo 2, where it's a one-time hit, takes quite a bit of investment. You gotta farm these essences that are kind of tedious, and then once you do it, the item is marked as imbued, and you can't ever change it again. So, gives you 1 reroll on 1 affix per item, is how I could see that playing out. Because then that adds a new minigame of hey, this item only has 4 good affixes, but it hasn't been imbued yet. So you guys could roll and see. You might get something really good. Or hey, this item has 4 good affixes, but I did imbue one of the affixes to be this good one. So if you buy this item, you're not going to get to modify it at all anymore. It's just, it is at face value what this is. So that could be a whole cool new little sub-game to the trade economy. I could see Diablo 2 having added something like that. 1 kind of really high investment reroll opportunity, and then you're done. But I think something like that might not ruin Diablo 2, but it's hard to say.
I thought this was a little silly or a little simple. I tried to do something without changing too much of the game. I have kind of 2 ideas of it. Is that the concept is you can only re-roll rare items.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I didn't mention that. In my head, that is how it works. Yeah, you can't re-roll unique or rune words. Yeah.
And the other option in my mind is you can wear 1 re-rolled item total.
Yeah,
in the same vein, you once the item has been corrupted, you can only wear 1 corrupted item.
Right, or
before it kind of
1 imbued item.
Before it takes 2. And they could even make that a seasonal thing. It's whoa, this season you can re-roll 2 items, that kind of thing. And the way that they kind of did, that's the only thing I could think of is just limit the number you could wear at a time.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think your idea is a better way to do it. And it kind of lets the market I know this is I don't like talking about an open market. But Diablo 2 was a trading game at its heart. Yeah. I think the reason it stayed popular is because of the currency setup they had. So
the way trading worked
think
just kept it popular.
So the idea of trading with the ring, that knowing that oh, this is what it is at the base, and I can still reroll one of these. Okay, that's good. Or seeing something this is all it is. That kind of having a separate value lever than the actual stats themselves. And
I'll bring Path of Exile into this again. Because of the way crafting works in Path of Exile, you can add affixes and suffixes. So a huge part of the trading game is you can either buy an item that has, let's say, 6 good affixes that you want, but it's going to be way more expensive, or you can try to find an item that has 5 or 4 affixes you want with an open suffix or open prefix, buy that item and then craft your own thing onto it, and it'll be cheaper, and it'll be harder to find in within the trade site because it's too long to talk about. But there is a system similar to that in Path of Exile where you can either just buy the perfect item up front, or you can buy one that's kind of worse and hope to make it better yourself. There's currencies in Path of Exile 2 that help with crafting. Anyways, that's a whole different thing, but there is a similar system to that. Or buying something that's corrupted or not corrupted. Like, it's corrupted,
So
I can never modify it again, but it's good.
So just to like kind of actually bring up the point of why I asked you this question is that I feel like Diablo 2 benefits from being cumbersome or not. The quality of life, the stuff that isn't there, makes the game force you to engage it on its own terms and to not do any shortcuts. So that you don't shortcut into this like optimized, unfun thing. Like, how I'm trying to word it is like Diablo 3 hits so many.
You're doing such a good job. I know exactly what you're saying.
Diablo 3 hits so many quality of life things that by the end of the game, you experience the full breadth of that character in 5 hours, and then you were done. It's like watching all of this art, like the entire storyline of this character, you experience in 5 hours, and then you're done with them. Versus Diablo 2's, because of the way it's structured, you get to that story. It takes a whole season to experience that one character's journey.
Yeah.
And I think it's because there are so few quality of life shortcuts, like being able to reroll affixes and are given starter legendaries or sets to try to catch you up with everyone else who's already speeding their way through. Sure. They're like, no, you're going to like the speed is the same every time. And I think that going slower is what I think benefits this genre than going fast because, like, I don't know. You don't get to notice or appreciate upgrades.
Yeah, that was a good way to put it, was that it forces you to engage with the systems in a way that it wants you to, and you can't shortcut it. And part of what happens to catering to a casual audience, of course, is that, you know, they add things like the Mystic and ways to make your gear better without having to find new gear. So, if I could play devil's advocate, not quite devil's advocate because it's just a fact, but we know that Blizzard as a company caters to casuals way, way, way more than devoted fans of their games anymore, right? Because they know that they
appeal for the widest possible market, not the niche market. Yeah.
Yes. So if we think about Diablo 2 from the eyes of a beginner, or let's say from somebody who has played Diablo 3, I remember when the remaster first came out, and there were a few posts of people like, I only ever played Diablo 3 and 4, I never played Diablo 2, and it's really cool, it's such a different game, but there was definitely posts that people talked about like how slow it was, they couldn't finish it, didn't want to play it. So in the modern, I realized in the other podcast I smack my mouth a lot. I'm really sorry for other people who might have noticed that. Trying not to do it, but sometimes it just escapes my head. I just did it again.
Now
Fucking
that you said
hell!
It's awoken memories in my brain. Oh my goodness! All right,
yeah,
so modern gamers
just yell at me if I do it. Yeah, so basically, yeah, Diablo 3 is just is appealing to the casual audience for the fast gamer, and I'd be lying if I didn't say I haven't played 3,000 hours of Diablo 3. I definitely have. It's definitely fun, but for a completely opposite reason of Diablo 2. And, you know, something about the items that we didn't talk about. You know, I talked about why Diablo 2 was so good, but I didn't talk about what makes Diablo 3 or 4 or other ARPGs worse. Is that... Oh, I just smacked my lips again. Is that the way that they have set up items is that anything below the highest rarity is worthless. At least that's how Diablo 3 and 4 is. If your character isn't fully decked out in legendaries and uniques, it's worthless. So if you find a white item, for fuck's sake, like, it is genuinely not even worth looking at. It's a waste of space, waste of screen time. Blue items are the same. Rares, you can find a cool rare, but you know you're going to get rid of it eventually. You're going to find a legendary, whatever. So it reinforces this whole end game is the only thing that matters kind of gameplay loop, where everything you find until the item is a fucking glowing orange legendary piece is just useless. And that's what makes the beginning parts of these games so fucking boring. And that's why Diablo 2 is just so perfect. You could seriously find stuff at level 10 that you're going to use until you're level 30 or 50, or even later if you're really lucky. But
I'd love to share an
items...
anecdote with you about the rarity system. And I'm the type of person that there's this game called The Bazaar, and it is kind of like a deck building game, but the idea is it takes place in rounds, and in between each round you get one of 3 events, and each event has a rarity associated with it. And diamond is the highest rarity. So if you see a diamond event, that means this is a very rare event, and I almost always go to them. The problem is, just because it's rare doesn't mean it's relevant to you. If I need items that have high crit chance, going to a place that cares about things that have the items that are hasted isn't relevant to me, but I see diamond, I'm like, oh, that must be better. And I think that is like inherently such a problem with the like psychology of like color coding loot. Is I see low rarity and I think, well, it's below the higher rarity thing I have. It's worse. When really it's just an indicator of how much stuff is modified on this base item. But like in my brain, that's not, it correlates to this is how good the item is. And I don't know how you change that, but I think it's gotten worse over time because every game does that now, where it's like legendary is the minimum actually.
Yeah, and the green up arrow of like, you don't have to actually read the stats, just see, okay, green up arrow, it's better than yours, put it on. You don't have to think about it.
Instead of understanding of like,
didn't have that.
Yeah, where it's like,
yeah, understanding what makes your character good.
That stuff.
Yeah, and AI would suggest it. Yeah, not understanding your character or what makes them good or how anything interacts with one another. You look for green arrow good or red arrow bad, and you put the item on or you drop the other one. You know, there's just no less thinking, less strategy, just less because they want to appeal to more.
Something I will say is that like as much as I understand the problem they're trying to solve, which is shortcut the amount of time you're sitting scrutinizing at numbers and text, because like there's a lot of time you're spending reading. And like, reading, that's fun. Comparing. But at some point, like, they almost want to be like, I want you to get back to playing the game with the toys that are dropping. And so they're trying to shortcut the amount of time that you are sitting there scrutinizing, and they're trying to highlight, like, yeah, overall this is better. But what has happened is, like, as they keep making that, like, adjustment to make it shorter, is it's now we are 12 iterations deep into optimizing that, where now we have completely removed reading stats that are just like, well, let's just remove all the like the stats so you don't have to even worry about reading them. Don't think about it. Just it'll just be one giant up arrow now. Like that's kind of where we're at. Like as we take each iterative step, we are now like 12 steps, I think, away from the original intent, which was like, I just have here's a list of stats, figure it out. I don't know what to tell you. Like Diablo 2 doesn't even tell you what stats are going up or down when you switch. They're just like, here's the stats. No comparison. Here's the other stats. And like in some ways, like that makes you decide. And the game has nothing to tell you if this gun. I'm thinking Borderlands because that's what I hate about Borderlands is like I could never tell the gun was better because it's just like this gun does 12,000 more damage. I was like, but what's the damage per second? Because I don't care how much damage one bullet does. And, like, there's not enough info for me to make an educated decision. But now with, like, Diablo 2, it's like, now I have to engage with my own build. I'm like, well, what do the skills say I do? It's like, oh, when you critically hit, deal double damage. Oh, I should probably want to get crit effects. Or things that's like, you know, each time you cast it, it gets stronger. Oh, I should get cast speed. So now then you start looking for those stats. But if you don't have to read those effects on your gear, you just look at, oh, this does more damage. Okay, go. You don't care about those other effects, like you said, the way the game interacts with each other, which is, like you said, the genre. The point of the genre is to find it is a clicker with more steps. You're just trying to make the big number go up, but they've obfuscated, made that part really fun, and so it should be about like looking at the stats and figuring out what's better. But I think they're trying to get people back into the game too quickly now that the game that it was built around, optimizing your loot, is now, they don't want playing that game really anymore. It's very weird. It's kind of like the opposite of what the kind of end goal feels like in some ways.
There was, we could probably have an entire additional podcast about Diablo 4 or Diablo 3, but one of the things that really went wrong with Diablo 4 was that it was, they kept talking about going back to the roots, trying to kind of make the game classic again, but with modern familiarities and all this stuff. And what ended up happening was, because even when they were previewing the game, they were showing rare items that gave plus skills or blue items that gave more plus skills than the rare items. So they were trying to implement in a way the item system that Diablo 2 had, where, different tiers of items were actually going to matter. But what ended up happening with Diablo 4 was that it had its foot in both camps, where it was trying to be very modern and fast and appeal to a wide audience, but then it also had its foot in the other camp of trying to appeal to hardcore players, get the Diablo 2 players back. And, of course, the casual audience overtook it. There was just more of them. And now Diablo 4 has slowly been balanced quite literally into Diablo 3. Diablo 4, before its expansion came out, was, it was barely different than Diablo 3. Genuinely. Like, it had become Diablo 3. So everything that they were... Yeah, like I said, this would be an entire other podcast to talk about the problems with Diablo 4, but that was just one of the things that I realized very quickly in Diablo 4, was that there were so many things that it was trying to kind of bait Diablo 2 players into coming back, but the game as a whole was very clearly trying to cater to the casual audience. And then over time, the hardcore players stopped playing very quickly because there just wasn't much there, and the casual players were like, why are these stupid, cumbersome, old school player mechanics in this game? Like, get rid of them. And Diablo 4 devs were like, yeah, I guess you're right. So eventually they just balanced the game into being Diablo 3.
At least that, and no, you're 100% correct. It's because, and this is a much bigger problem, it's because Diablo 4 made too much money to make that they couldn't cater to the less than 1 million in players that they could have won with Diablo 2. But instead, they needed Diablo 3 2 sales. Yes. So that's just...
Yeah.
That's, like I said, it's a much bigger problem of, like, video games' scope is embarrassing, and stop making games that nobody wants to play. Instead, make a small game that everybody, like, a specific group of people want to play that... There's a reason Persona 5 and, like, that weeb-ass shit is so popular, is because it's such a good JRPG. It's so good that people who don't like that genre are like, I don't like those games, but that one's really good. All I'm saying is that, like, that's what video games are doing, is that there's just like, so we gotta sell 800 million copies of this to break even.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a
not even that anymore. It's like, we need to make $1 billion a year on this, or we're gonna cancel it. Like, that's how games work now. It's not even selling copies anymore. It's making we're going to talk about this as really capitalism is the problem. Needing to see more profits every year. That's what's killing
Free Luigi.
the whole world.
I don't care. You can't cancel me, Kyle. Fuck you.
Yeah, that's what's actually killing gaming is capitalism, truly. And it's because, like, quest for
I
never-ending profits and milking players and turning games into addictive, endless money pits, rather than just, like, remember when you would buy Jak and Daxter 2 and just play it on your PlayStation and that was it? And you could throw the CD in the garbage afterwards and the company didn't care because you bought their game and you played it. Like, that's just not how games exist anymore.
Yeah, it's video games have always needed, or like video games have always needed, like, to have capitalism in mind a little bit, right? Like, they have to make some money, but it used to be artists were making a thing that they were selling to people. You know, it was a thing they wanted to make and they thought would be really cool and really interesting, and spoke to them and their creative process, instead of being like, well, cool, but how do we appeal to the Gen Alpha, because we're at the point where Gen Z, those are the 20, 30, 24-year-olds now. Like, how do we appeal to those kids? It's like, well, this game is about this thing. It's like, yeah, but what about the people who don't play that genre? What about the people who don't want to play your game? And it's like, I want people to make a thing that speaks to a specific group instead of trying to hit it for everybody, because I know it's dumb freaking quoting The Incredibles, for God's sake. Just like, when everything's special, nothing is type.
Yeah, well, that's why this podcast is turning into something completely different. Remember, we're talking about Diablo 2, LOL.
But no,
that's
but
why
Diablo 2 is the opposite of it, so it is related there.
Right,
I fixed it.
Yes, correct. And there's the one other comment I wanted to make was that I forgot what it is, so now I can't say it. Fuck. So that indie games are kind of having a renaissance right now, because the last decade has been just milking consumers and, capitalism 101, make more, make more, make more. And finally, gamers are getting kind of sick of it. So in the last about 4 or 5 years, indie games have really started to explode. And we're in a bit of a renaissance, like I said, where people are starting to appreciate the good old days again. Like, oh yeah, I could just buy this game for $20 or $40 and just play it and not have to worry, disconnect from the world. Like, that's why Elden Ring was so cool. It was a really, really good reminder of that. It was like, you buy this game for $60 and then you are in this world and you can disconnect from everything else. There's no microtransactions trying to dupe you into buying skins. There's no, remember to play multiplayer so that you can see the other people with the cool skins and then trick you into buying them because you want to look that cool. It's like, no, it's an RPG. You buy it.
There's
a
little box on the main menu. They have a box to the DLC store to remind you to buy more content. It's just driving by McDonald's is sad, Remember when they were bright and yellow and gaudy and stupid? And now they're corporated souls.
Yeah, let's not transform this podcast into something that isn't. I actually want to bring this back to Diablo 2, because Diablo 2, hilariously enough, it never came to fruition, but they actually were going to make purchasable content, DLC.
Yeah, that's right.
They had the idea that if you spend like $1 or $2, you could pay Blizzard directly and they will put items or characters or whatever on a CD-ROM and mail that to you. And then you could put the CD in your computer and download the files and get the new item or the new skin or whatever it is they were trying to sell. I don't remember exactly. I think they wanted to sell like downloadable items or something, but
the concept was to sell people more items to add to the pool. And I remember
so they actually
trying to figure out how to monetize more.
So Skyrim is usually
Oblivion. It's okay.
Oblivion is usually given credit for the DLC thing with the horse armor, right? Everyone talks about the horse armor being the first ever DLC.
The horse armor.
Spend $5 to get this armor for your horse, and it was completely outside of the game. It was literally a microtransaction, more like a macro transaction, because like you had to. Did they have to send you a CD? How did you even get the horse armor? Anyways, Diablo 2.
It was the Xbox Live Marketplace.
Do it.
It was digital storefront.
Oh, it was digital.
See,
okay.
that one.
So Diablo 2.
That's why they could do it.
Yes, the marketplace, how digital made it easy. Diablo 2 tinkered with the idea, but they didn't. They had BattleNet, but they didn't quite have, like, file sharing wasn't as good back then. So, yeah, Diablo 2 was kind of the godfather of microtransactions, and a lot of people don't know it because it didn't happen. Luckily,
that also is like, it's just the difference between they wanted to sell like a tiny amount of content instead of like a big expansion pack, because it's like, of course you would pay more for more content, but the idea was just like, just for a couple of items it'd be a couple bucks. It was just like, that was where it started to feel a little weird. Like, where do you draw the line? Because like expansion packs felt cool. Like, oh, you had a new idea.
God,
not
I love
like
expansions.
I just want to. I don't just want more stuff. I want more ideas. Like, and if you don't have an idea, then don't make a content for it. Don't just make stuff to make stuff. And like, nothing Diablo 2 felt like that. Everything feels so intentional. I know, like, one of the things is like, you're able to name so many uniques from that game because they all kind of makes an impression. Because there's not like an infinite number of items. There's a lot, but like they stand out, and a lot of them have cool designs. Like, I will never forget the Harlequin Shaco. I don't know if the Harlequin's crest.
Harlequin crest, correct? Yep.
Yeah,
but everyone just called it Shaco for short,
Oculus.
even though. Yeah, the Oculus. Love that.
There's just
Yeah.
cool
Diablo
shit.
2, let's circle this back, because we are now approaching 2 hours, and I have to go to the bathroom very badly.
Holy
So,
shit. Yeah.
yeah, let's just circle back and kind of close this up. Diablo 2, my all-time favorite game. It did everything right, from the atmosphere to the music to the gameplay itself to the pacing to the skills to the items. It was just so satisfying as a gaming experience from top to bottom. It's also a game that has pulled thousands of hours out of me, and this was before the times of live service games that wanted, talked about player engagement. If we're kind of bashing on current gamings and trends, the live service model is a problem, right? It's like the engagement, they're obsessed with that. But Diablo 2, the way that they built the game, it just naturally engaged you for a long time. And it might not have even been their intent or their goal, but just the way the gameplay loop was, it's pulled thousands of hours out of me, even though it's doesn't have engagement metrics, doesn't have an end game, doesn't have constantly evolving patches and content and whatever. Like, yeah,
There's something
just
to be said about the fact that it doesn't have anything else, that it allowed everybody to like kind of figure out the game, you know?
Yeah.
There's almost that like
Now, of course, they did add patches.
Reflect.
They did add patches, which did spice things up, like the synergy patch we talked about, which was sort of a...
Oh, I meant like now,
some people
looking
didn't
back
like
on it 20
patch,
years,
but...
it's been now like probably 10 to 15 years since that patch came. Like the last Diablo 2 base game patch has come out. And I know Resurrected also muddied that a bit, but when you're talking about like the legacy of Diablo 2, we had 10 years of no adjustments to the content, and it was still just as like engaging and
like if you went back to the original Diablo 2 and Diablo 2 Lord of Destruction, you could still play the game in the same way that we're describing and still have the same experience. You didn't. Yeah, as a legacy item, it is truly phenomenal. We didn't even talk about the lore either, which is another really cool thing. The cinematics between each act are so good. This contributed to what Taylor said earlier about the world just being like really grim and horrific. The cinematics really helped craft that world, and the game was so grounded. That was the thing too, is that it obviously you're playing this kind of superhero character that's got magical powers, that's killing demons. Like, none of this shit exists, but it felt grounded, and like I felt the pressure of what's happening in the world. And poor fucking Marius.
Jesus Christ,
he really helped.
Like that guy.
No, yeah, poor Marius. So yeah, lore we didn't touch on, but the lore in Diablo 2 is really subtle and amazing too. I love the way the quests are. You can just kind of read and learn about them if you want, but otherwise it's like, go kill this thing and you go do it. Go collect this item and you do it. But if you actually listen to the characters talk, you can really get more out of it and have the world fleshed out. It's like how the From Software does their lore too. You can engage with it if you want, and if you don't, you can still play the game and enjoy it just as much as anyone else. That might have been a limitation of the time. They could do cinematics, but other than that, like, how are they gonna... They can't force feed you story like a lot of games try to now.
The lack of focus and deep diving is what gives a lot of Diablo 2 its strength, because Diablo 3 and 4, as they've attempted to really laser in and explain the edges of their universe, it got less interesting. So I think Diablo 2 and 1, by extension, has a lot of strength because you just are hearing about this world at a distance, at very vaguely, because you don't have time to sit and reminisce about these things. You just got to stop it, but they give you just enough to get you afraid of what you're going up against without telling you how dumb they are. So
or telling you that like the Butcher is a race of people and it's not just one guy. Oh, fucking God. Like, yeah. So yeah, I love the way that you explain stuff like that. The way you were talking about Diablo's systems and now talking about the lore, just like the way that these developers got you to engage with their content in a really specific way is it's something that I say a lot too with movies. Is that big budget stifles creativity, or I can't think of the word, but like being restrained and contained is having constraints breeds creativity. And that feels like a lot of what Diablo 2 did, where they were constrained by the technology of the time, the era of video games that existed around them, how they were trying to push the genre, kind of create a new thing. But they kind of couldn't because there was nothing else to pull from. There was no other examples. Like, they had a lot of constraints, and that, I think, is what let them make such a beautiful, perfect game for me. All-time favorite game.
Yeah, I really can't disagree with anything you have to say about it. I'm with you on it. It's an all-timer, Hall of Famer. You're legally not allowed to be mean about Diablo 2 on the internet. It's just against the law.
Yeah. Well, I got nothing else to say. I really love Diablo 2. It's a special place in my heart. I'll be the nerd typical idiot where I get this one big gaudy tattoo of the one video game I love and put it on my chest or some shit. Diablo 2.
Yeah, dude, just get the honestly though, if you got the box art of Diablo 2 on your chest, that'd be fucking sick, dude.
That
box art rules.
Yeah, it actually wouldn't be too bad.
I will always say shout out to Justin Cavanis for playing that and showing me the very first image of Diablo 2's Arcane Sanctuary as a terrible whirlwind barbarian.
Dude, I can see his character and the armor he was wearing. It was oh my god, I love that you brought that up. Yeah. He was in the Arcane Sanctuary using whirlwind. He had the armor on it's all black, but it's really spiky and has kind of gold outline around the armor on the shoulder plates. I don't know what specific armor gives that look, but that's the armor he was wearing. And I think he was wearing a great helm because it had the big horns. Like, he looked so fucking badass. And I remember it was at the lake house.
I remember the big two-handed axe, the one with the red handle and the very long blade. That's the one.
I think it's called a feral axe in the later acts, but I don't know what it is early on. Great. It might just be a great axe earlier on.
Yeah, that might be the great axe.
No, that's like the big... Shit, I don't know. Anyways.
I think it's the same tier you get where the crowns start dropping as a helmet.
Yes, it is. It's like in that same class. And it's not even a feral axe. The feral axe was something else. Anyways, yeah, shout out to Justin. I remember watching him whirlwind through Arcane Sanctuary.
He's probably the reason I played MMOs too, so he really fucked me up.
And shout out, I guess, to Dad, because Dad bought us Diablo 2 and had us play it, and I don't know if he did that before all Justin or... Yeah, it's all from
I bet you we asked and he delivered, because you're right, it was at Dad's house. I remember installing it there, so yeah.
Yeah, me too.
That PC, man, what a legend.
Oh yeah, it's gone through some shit.
Well, we'll have to deep dive on that another time, but... Thanks, everybody, for listening all the way through our very weird podcast about Diablo 2 and how good it is.
Yes, thanks, everyone. We love Diablo 2. Go play it if you haven't. If you have any interest in games and ARPGs and shit, it's really worth playing. Especially Diablo 2 Resurrected. They did a phenomenal job of making it feel fairly modern and playable.
Thank you for making something I can just wholeheartedly. I don't have to say any stipulations. Just like, if you're thinking about it, just buy the modern version that's easy to buy and run. Like, yeah, really nice. You can play it offline if you want, so it doesn't have any of the problems. So just get Resurrected. It's all good.
Nice. GG's. Love Diablo 2. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.